Welcome to the Practice You podcast. My name is Elena Brower. Really dear teacher of mine, Dan Shankin, is a psychedelic integration coach. He is really serving people with sustainable, harmonious, compassionate, wise instruction and integration. His methods are fiercely practical. He maintains space for mystery and magic. He offers time-tested and scientifically backed tools so that clients can create a life for themselves that is aligned with their deeper values and manifests measurable results that actually matter to them. Psychedelic use is a very important topic that I think I have avoided for long enough, and I'm ready to dive in. Daniel is the founder and director of Tam Integration. So his whole work, his whole service is integrating psychedelic experiences. That's his work. We're here to talk about psychedelic experiences. We're here to talk about integrating your psychedelic experiences in a way that is conscious, accessible, supported. And we're here to talk about what that education looks like. So, Daniel, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure.
As you know, we've talked about this plenty of times, but perhaps my listener hasn't known yet. I've been sober from marijuana and alcohol for almost 9 years now. Wow. And I avoided psychedelics for all that time because I was under the impression that psychedelics were a part of my addiction. What I didn't realize is that actually at the very end of my addiction to marijuana, I started using psychedelics, microdosing psychedelics. And I'm now starting to understand that that use possibly helped me see the light and stop getting high. Earlier, probably about 3 to 5 months ago, I was introduced to microdosing intentionally with integration by a dear friend of mine. He's the founder of The Kind Teacher. And he helped me through a great trial and a great time in my life where I was really struggling to shift some behavior patterns that were very deeply ingrained. A 3-month course of microdosing changed all of that. What I went in to change has changed. What I wanted to transform has been completely transformed. Daniel, in coming in contact with your work at Tam Integration and now being part of your Integration Jam for 2023, I have discovered that there's a whole world that is prioritizing integration of psychedelic experiences so that we can take these experiences, move the understandings and insights into our lives in ways that actually do make lasting change. And I thought I would start by finding out how you got into this in the first place.
I got into it because I needed it. I got into psychedelic integration before I knew that that was a term. Somebody had pushed Be Here Now into my hands, Ram Dass's Be Here Now, because that was basically the first integration manual that had ever been written. And it was written, from Ram Dass's perspective. And, he had gotten very, very high and had spiritual experiences and awakenings and found that yoga practice grounded him in the place that he wanted to be. And my experiences were kind of similar without going to India, I suppose, until much later. But, I had a yoga practice and it really encouraged me to use that yoga practice as a tool for liberation and a tool for grounding, for liberation in the body and the life in this lifetime kind of thing. And so that's kind of what I did for many, many years. And the integration was sort of happening implicitly and a little bit on the underground and quietly. And my coaching clients over time wanted to talk to me about psychedelics more and more and more. And that kind of happened naturally over the course of, a decade. I guess I just have one of those faces that people feel like they can talk about taking mushrooms with me. And
you do have that kind of a face, dude. You do. I've instantly felt comfortable with you. I know we have had a connection for many years from New York, but this was very sticky for me, and you were very easy to talk to about it.
Yeah, and so that's it. Just kind of grew from there.
Wonderful. And Tam Integration, talk to us about this program, what you are offering through this program. Talk to us about the Integration Jam that you have annually. I'd love to learn a little more.
So Tamalpais is the mountain in Marin County. I've moved from Marin County since I live in New England now, but that's where it was happening. That's where we started. And we just started with little integration circles, places where people could come and talk about their experiences and share what was going on for them and unpack the mystery, all the highs and the lows of it. And those have been going strong for 5 years. We've never asked anybody for a dime. We accept donations, but that's a free offering. And from there, other events have started to emerge. We started doing talks in the local coffee shop, talking with providers of all kinds of things, experts in all different molecules and with all different perspectives on things. And the Integration Jam, we were joking around that in late stage capitalism, people can't really be friends unless they have an objective. Like there needs to be a project or an objective for people to make time to hang out with each other. And so I created the Integration Jam so that I could have an excuse to talk to people that I thought were cool about topics that I thought were cool.
Mm-hmm.
And
I love it.
yeah,
I love it.
and we do them online because it's accessible. I know there are psychedelic conferences all over the world, almost every week these days, and I can't just gallivant off to the Netherlands and then Peru and then Arcata and then Arizona. And if I can't do it, other people really can't do it. So I wanted there to be an opportunity for people to gather and try and give them as much of a community spirit kind of vibe as I could while it's still being online. And we're getting pretty good at it.
Yeah, you are. You are. There's such a broad swath of offerings and, insights, understandings, experiences from the people that you're interviewing and talking to. I really appreciate it. You have 2 kids, 2 young kids.
I do.
How's that going?
It's going great. River's really into wolves these days. We've been talking a lot about the idea of keystone species, right? Of like biodiversity and ecosystems. And, he understands that the wolves need to scare the elks away from the saplings so that the saplings can grow and create shade for the fish. It's like he's starting to kind of wrap his head around the fact that things are connected. And we're having a lot of fun just kind of moving through all of the wolf podcasts that we can find on our rides to and from school.
Of course. Oh, that's genius. The interconnectedness is, it's fun how that goes back to the work with psychedelics, how quickly psychedelics brought me personally and bring people back into that understanding of how the tree shades the water, protecting the fish.
Yeah.
And around it goes.
He's a country kid. We live in a little tiny town in the woods and, he plays in the creeks and, he climbs on the rocks and, that's his life.
Yeah. So beautiful. And foraging for mushrooms, of course.
We were back to the topic of psychedelics. I take him foraging. There's a little club that goes foraging on Sundays. And we came back with, he's got his little basket and it's full of little mushrooms. And we're laying them out on the floor to show Mom. And Mom picked one of them up and said, "Is this psychedelic?" And he's 2.5. And he looks at it and he looks at her and he goes, "Not psychedelic."
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, he was right. It wasn't. But it's just funny that he even, that was the first time I heard him pronounce the word. It said in his presence enough, but it was the first time he pronounced it.
Oh, that's just so sweet. And he was correct.
Yeah.
Is your wife involved in this work at all?
She's a Vedic astrologer.
Oh, wonderful.
And an Ayurvedic practitioner and a massage therapist. And that's kind of, she's in the know. She's been around.
Of course.
But,
Of course.
her work is pretty much focused on that. She really has a mind for Jyotish.
Of course. Wonderful. And for the folks who might be listening, who are really curious about psychedelics, but maybe are a little afraid and don't know kind of where to begin, Let's talk a little bit about microdosing intentionally,
Okay.
and then we can talk about macrodosing intentionally. I'm really interested in hearing you sort of expound. So microdosing is what I did, as I mentioned at the beginning in our opening. For 3 months, I did 3 days on and 4 days off. That's just how it felt right in my body. It was 100 milligrams. Toward the end, there was 150 milligrams, but it felt like a little too much, so I went back to 100. And I was very intentional. Each day I would set my little microdose of my 3 days a week. I would set it on the altar. I would do my sitting meditation, and then I would take it. My intention for the entire course was to lose the last vestiges of anger in my body. There were still some left, even after I had quit smoking weed, even after I'd cleaned my liver dozens of times since then. I'd love to talk to you about your experience with people integrating in specific ways.
Sure. Just for the record, let's just say this isn't medical advice. This is not legal advice. We're not telling anybody what to do. Everybody should do their own homework and talk to their professionals.
Yes, thank you.
Because, these things aren't legal in most places. There are some places in America where they're decriminalized now, and that's nice. But so there's an element of risk that I just want to acknowledge. And also, it's really wonderful that there's so much education out there now. There's so many resources, a lot of which are free, like YouTube is your friend. We have a YouTube channel. It's got maybe 100 hours of material on it. I've got an archive that has another 200 or 300 hours on my website, but there's lots of stuff. There's lots of stuff so that you can start to make informed decisions about which molecule might you want to microdose and how often, that your protocol might be different than somebody else's protocol. Understanding that 100 milligrams for one person might feel like a lot, and for somebody else it might feel like nothing. And so each person kind of taking the time to educate themselves, make good decisions with the information that they have, and then responding to the feedback they get from their body and their mind, and maybe even doing a little journaling around it, tracking it intelligently. I'm not going to say it's a good way to start. I'm going to say it's a common way to start. It's what people do anecdotally. Does that answer your question for starters?
It does. It totally does. What I found was that the microdosing gave me a new sense of life, a new sense of sort of vitality, the connection that we were just talking about. A lot more creativity came through.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt very practical. Like, oh, okay. It felt like a new part of my brain had opened. There were like these little leaps in my body of joy and fulfillment throughout the few hours of those days when I was taking the microdoses. And then I found that that joy continued on the days that I wasn't, which is why I did so many days in between.
Right.
3 days on, 4 days off for me, which was just how it worked. But I felt like I was getting restructured.
Right. Cool. So you're a big NVC person.
I am.
So I kind of like to think about it in terms of psychedelics are a nonspecific amplifier in that they bring up what's already there. That's usually either living underneath our level of awareness, or maybe it's been repressed or what have you. So you've got that. Quite often it's not that the psychedelic is making you anything, right? It's revealing what's there. It's an orange juice squeezer.
Thank you for saying that.
And then on the other hand, right, there's the thing about needs and emotions, right, in nonviolent communication. This, of course, blew my mind, that when your needs are met, you have pleasant emotions, and when your needs are not met, you have unpleasant emotions, right? I needed somebody with a handout to explain that to me. So
we're not taught that
we're not taught
as
that.
kids. We're not taught that. And the truth of the matter is we all have these very specific needs. And when the needs are met, there's a happy day, period. The end.
And so not only are we not taught that connection, we're often not taught that it's okay to have needs. And quite often we're taught the opposite, that it's not okay to have needs. So then along comes a mushroom and amplifies the need. And it's like, you need to be more creative. You need to hydrate. Sometimes it's as, I talk to people and they were like, I know the microdosing is working because I had been cranky at my desk for so long and I didn't know why. And then I took a microdose and I realized that my feet were cold and I needed to put on socks.
Oh my God.
Right? So just like real basic get in
Yeah.
your body stuff, drink enough water, do some exercise. And then from there, you start to get to like a baseline where like the things that are higher on Maslow's hierarchy can start to be handled.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's interesting how that sort of individual understanding of a need that can be revealed when one comes in contact with a psychedelic molecule of some kind becomes kind of a transformation. I understand what I need. That's my transformation. That becomes a better parent, a better partner. And that becomes a whole cascade of other events of all the people that I'm touching being better in their worlds.
yeah. And then one of the nice things about an integration coach or an integration circle is effective, sustainable strategies for meeting the needs. Because sometimes if we have repressed a need to be creative, for example, or to be connected to nature, and we've repressed that for so long so that we have no idea how to meet that need. And then we take a large amount of psychedelics, and then we have this kind of thing where the need is up. And you're like, okay, well, I just need to run away to the jungle and I'm just going to play guitar all day, right? Because that's just a brute force way of getting that need met. Whereas if we take a pause, we don't have to nuke our own life. We can find methods that are more sophisticated to get our needs met that doesn't hurt those around us.
Right. Much more practical. Much more practical. It's funny. I wish more people would understand the benefits of psychedelics in these practical terms
Yeah.
without feeling like it's going to threaten their, sobriety, standing in the world. I've completely come to understand that this is not about inebriation. It's actually about enhancement. And I've told you this before, but I haven't told our listener. I did 3 months of that, and then it was done. That was it. Like, I haven't had a thought about it since. Maybe I'll pick it up again at some point, but I feel,
It'll be around.
yeah, it's around. And I feel fresh still.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah,
wild.
yeah, it's really interesting that these substances, for the most part, are anti-addictive. Ketamine notwithstanding, but like the true psychedelics, mescalines and your LSDs and your psilocybin, they don't stand for those sorts of patterns. They become irritating.
Mm. The history of humanity shows throughout that people have used psychedelic substances as tools to connect with the earth and with themselves and with the divine. And they've been used in religious contexts, and indigenous cultures centered much of their practice around the various plants and their molecules. I'm curious to talk a little bit about macro now. I've had a few macro experiences in my life, both before I got sober and since. I've had two that were really exceptional, very intentional and very exceptional. Talk to us a little bit about what Tam Integration provides in terms of macro integration.
Well, we do pre and post, right? If you were in a decriminalized part of the world and you had your own medicine, you could probably fly me out there. But for the most part, we're doing pre and post work. And the preparation is really key. Let's say two different kinds of clients. The people who just come back from Peru from an ayahuasca circle who are freaked out and need like triage care, right? And it's like, okay, we'll provide that, we can help. We can ground you out, we can get you centered, and we understand. But it's really nice when I get somebody who is like, hey, I've been reading this material, I've been doing the research, and I want to do this intentionally, and I want somebody to walk with me while we do it. And so how do I set up, my intention setting, and how do I set up my mindset, and how do I contemplate what is important for me and what I want to achieve out of this, and what can I expect, and those sorts of things. And so we've got a pretty good process for taking somebody through an arc of preparation and personal ritual and aftercare and long-term integration that We actually teach. We have a training program. We certify integration coaches. And
Wow, I didn't know that.
yeah, and great bunch of people right now. And we are, looking forward to our retreat up here in New England. People are coming out and, we're going to be talking about music. We're going to be talking about nature. We're going to be holding space for each other with ketamine, which is legal. Not necessarily my preference, but it's okay. It's a cool molecule. And also, I want to train them in it because so many people are being prescribed ketamine, often by people who have no idea what it's all about. And there's an anesthesiologist somewhere in Topeka that is trying to do a cash grab, and they're leaving a trail of fractured psyches in their wake. And those people are going to need care from people who understand how that stuff works.
The anesthesiologist doing the cash grab is basically administering ketamine in an irresponsible way. Is that what I'm gleaning from what you just said?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, people sort of make a nod to integration. Oh, yeah, it's kind of important. Oh, yeah, set and setting is kind of important. But when the rubber meets the road, it's like they're going to do the thing that's cheaper and more scalable.
Right.
Because they don't even get it.
And meanwhile, what I think is so important and what I've experienced is very important is if I did so much writing during that time to sort of try and embody what was opening inside of myself, what was coming to be an insight inside of myself. And now it's a part of everything that I do.
Right.
Because I took the time to integrate what I was coming to understand into my behavior and into my ways of relating with other people. It's so important.
Yeah. So
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah, we try and do it right. Sometimes we even consult with people like that so that they can do it right. And create an experience that is respectful of our consciousness, respectful of these molecules. And it's easy for me to say they're sacred. Not everybody necessarily has that kind of worldview, and that's fine. But there's no reason not to approach intense experiences with a certain amount of reverence.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to be nervous, but, it's like a little bit of reverence doesn't hurt.
No, we're talking to the earth. These are plants from Mother Earth. Like, it took me a long time to really understand the depth of the reverence that I can hold. So I'm very spacious when it comes to folks who haven't considered that yet. Last couple notes, and then we'll close and probably come back some later time. But what I wanted to talk about was the compounds in psilocybin, because this is what I experienced, and the way in which those compounds, those molecules, decrease the activity to the part of my brain that is persona, identified, that is sort of naming myself and my roles and my life. It's sort of like the volume gets turned down there and other things can emerge. And I just wanted our listener to understand that this is a scientific process. We're not just like talking about random drug use. We're talking about compounds that scientifically decrease circulation to certain parts of the brain, increasing circulation to other parts of the brain, which is why it holds so much promise for personal growth.
I don't have anything to add to that. It's so cool. And it's also really cool to go into this with a meditation practice. Like they did a study at Johns Hopkins University. They were working with people with PTSD and depression almost exclusively and substance use disorders. And then, they asked this question, I wonder if this is also good for quote unquote healthy normals. And they knew it was, they're pretending they didn't know, but, they didn't have scientific evidence. So they started bringing in healthy normals, and then they started bringing in meditators, like people who, had logged thousands of hours of meditation. There's a really great video that came out recently where Roland Griffiths, who's one of the guys who started Johns Hopkins psilocybin studies, and Tara Brach, who we all know, were talking, and they're old friends. And her husband did one of the clinical trials. She was not selected for reasons, but, understanding that meditators have more of the positive effects and fewer of the negative side effects. And I think one of it is that a meditator is often used to putting their persona aside. The ego death can be a very painful experience, very terrifying and painful. But kind of once it's gone, it's like, oh, well, this is still cool. And so I have experiences where the stuff starts to take hold, and then there's a part of my mind that, I often think is me. I'll hear it say, "Oh, I'm not required for this part. I'll be over here if you need me."
Yeah.
Right? And then
Checking out.
it kind of goes away, and then the music fills my mind, and the molecule fills my mind, and, more is revealed.
I'm going to close with a quote from Rosalind Watts, who's a scientist and an author, several studies on the sort of increased flexibility psychologically, increased connectedness, increased acceptance that one could possibly experience with a proper, intentionally administered psychedelic journey, let's say. Quote, "Our brain is like a skier that ordinarily follows the well-trodden tracks. The psilocybin experience can temporarily disrupt and flatten the old grooves in the snow, setting up the possibility that new tracks may be laid down. Essentially, psychedelic administration can foster new short-term flexibility and the ability to start new habits of thinking, acting, and feeling."
Beautiful.
Yeah. I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I appreciate the prioritization that you've put on integration. I think that it is everything. And I look forward to more time together in the future. For the Integration Jam, which happens annually at this particular, let's say, juncture in time, the Integration Jam for 2023 does have a link. And if you catch it, it's 2023.integrationjam.com. If you use coupon code Elena, you save 10% on the jam. Can you just quickly gloss over how the jam works, when it's coming out, etc.?
The jam runs from the 28th to the 30th. There's
of April.
Post-conference intensives on May 1st, and it's about 25 live talks, and then about another 10 or 12 hours of kind of pre-recorded bonus talks. And we have everybody from tribal leaders from Ecuador that coming to speak to, PsyDs, doctors who have kind of pioneered some of like ketamine talk therapy, to, underground workers who do somatic work, mindfulness meditation stuff. We've got conversations about death and grief and psychedelics. It's one of the really interesting things that comes up with psychedelics is the deep grief that we've been carrying around with us. It's really wonderful to let people let go of the sadness that they've been carrying about. Yeah, I mean, everybody knows why you're grieving. We've got an amazing poet and author named Sophie Strand who's going to be talking about mythology.
She's rad.
She's so rad.
Rad. She's so rad. One of the best writers of the time.
Yeah, I think she's going to be in New Mexico soon.
Ooh.
You should go say hi.
I will find her. Amazing.
We've got some comedians. This guy named Dennis Walker who runs a podcast called the Micropreneur Podcast. He's a satirist. So we're going to be having some fun.
Yeah, that's funny.
Because
micropreneurship is a thing.
Yeah. And, it's half a joke and it's half not. And he's hilarious. Yeah. Shane Norte, native guy from Southern California in the desert, who runs enormously high-dose ceremonies, often for veterans. So these very kind of sacred ceremonies that happen up in the hills, like 20 gram ceremonies.
I know so many veterans who could totally use that, who are walking around carrying images in their heads.
Yeah.
And blame in their bodies.
Yeah.
Oof.
I think they call it like
that really
moral
touched me.
trauma.
Yeah, there's actually a great website for that, moralinjuriesofwar.org. Esther Perel's husband, Jack Saul, founded it, and it has helped really thousands of veterans to find their way back to themselves.
Yeah. One of Rosalind Watts's partners at Imperial College, Sam Gandy, is going to...
Oh, cool.
Sam is so cool. And he's going to be talking about like almost like connoisseurship, like the differences in different strains of mushrooms. Everybody wants to talk about like, well, what's with the, penis envy? What's with the golden teacher? What's with the albino? How are the trips different? How are they the same? Is it actually different? Is it actually the same? And so we're going to have that discussion.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's great, actually.
And then we've got you.